Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, please?
Loud and clear.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time that you're joining us. I am Sunday Kuniva Ngwango, a climate change advocate, climate justice advocate also. I am also an environmental sustainability advocate from Cameroon. It's a pleasure to welcome you today to the Green Masterclass session on climate justice organized by Cross Eco Network Initiative. Climate justice is about fairness, ensuring that the people and communities least responsible for climate change are not the ones who suffer the most, though that's what happens always. Today's session will help us understand how we as young Africans can take action to create a fairer, more sustainable future. Today's session will be facilitated by someone with a multidisciplinary background in public health, mental health, communications, and community development. She has over 5 years of experience engaging youths, so she will be bringing both lived experience and expertise. She has consulted for organizations like Dove, Generation Mental Health, Susty Vibes, and Connecting Climate Minds. She currently serves as the research lead for the African Network of Youth Policy Experts, developing evidence-based recommendations to strengthen health systems and promote social connection across Africa. I am actually very excited for this session, and I hope that everyone, all the participants are excited as well, and they are also ready to learn. And yes, our facilitator is no other than Molly Ogbodum. Hey, Molly.
Hi, Quiniva. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Okay, I can go on.
For sure, you can go on.
Okay, sending a request to share my screen. Okay, let me know if my screen is visible. Can you see my screen? All right, so hello everyone. Morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're joining from. So like rightly introduced, my name is Molly, and I'm based in Nigeria. And today we'll be, talking about climate justice and addressing the various inequities in climate impact, and also talking about who holds the power, who makes the decisions, and what are the solutions that are being made and are being put forth out there. So I know that we are a very diverse group of people. So I'm not quite sure how participants are supposed to engage, but I would like to get like from one or two people what they understand by climate change, right? Anyone in the chat, if it's possible. Queniva, is that possible? Can we get participants to engage?
They are supposed to engage. For
Okay,
now.
so yeah. Oh, it's just that I can't really
They
like
can
see.
ask their question even on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah.
On my
If someone
end,
can answer, they can also write it there and we will read. So they can go on.
okay, if you can read from YouTube, that'll be fine. I don't have access at that end. But okay, I'll just go on. I wanted to just have an interactive session here. So we know the term climate change with reference to changes or shifts in temperatures and weather patterns over time. And for me, I like to liken the concept of climate change like a boiling pot on fire, right? You know, the very instance you put it on, it feels as though nothing is happening, but those little, very almost insignificant or unnoticeable changes over time, what all you just need is some time or some minutes, and before you know, the temperature rises from 0 to 100 degrees, which is like the boiling point. So if it exceeds and vaporize. So the concept of climate change is that these changes most times are often unnoticeable, right? And that is why they are sometimes not being considered. So, but if you are to evaluate, do a retrospective evaluation of our temperature and weather patterns today, in respect to like say maybe 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago, right, you will now notice that, oh, there has been major shifts we weren't just observing. So that is the concept of climate change. And then we are breaking the two terms, climate and justice. We've heard of justice, we've heard climate change. So bringing them together, what is climate justice? But also would like to explore what is justice. So justice, as we know, is moral rightness, fairness in how people are treated, how how resources are being distributed within communities and across diverse groups, right? Justice is also upholding what is right and what is equitable. So in the concept of climate justice, we can now merge the same to say, okay, the climate is changing over the years, but is justice being served in the sense that are the people who are most affected, right, are they making decisions concerning climate mitigation or climate adaptation or climate solutions that are being developed or being implemented across various countries. So, like I've stated, climate justice is fairness and equity in climate solutions. Like every other concept of justice, if we talk about social justice or if we talk about health justice, it's just about ensuring that people have equal access to health or to social services, equal access, equal rights, regardless of gender, race, tribes, geographic location, etc., etc. So climate justice recognizes that climate change is beyond an environmental issue. And I like this part specifically because when we say climate change, we just think, okay, it's just about the environment around us. But in a more broader sense, we get to see that climate change is also a social, economic, and human rights issue. And as we progress, you will get to see some of those components that really make up the social components or the economic or human rights issues that are being presented in climate change, right? So it is fairness and equity in climate solutions, and climate justice begs the question: who caused the problem? Recall we said justice is fairness, is moral rightness, is ensuring that people have access to the right resources, or ensuring that resources are being distributed evenly within the community and across groups. So climate justice says who caused the problem, who suffers most, and who decides the solution. So we're going to answer each of these pieces as we progress. Okay, so again, climate justice seeks fair treatment and meaningful involvement of everyone in environmental decision making. And recall again, not just environmental, in social, in economic, and in human rights issues. So it seeks the involvement of people in each of these processes in determining what solutions should be provided or what solutions should be prevented for various climate mitigation or adaptation processes. And it ensures that no group of people, especially marginalized communities, bear a disproportionate impact or share of negative environmental consequences. So the concept of justice is just based on fairness, that no one is bearing the cost of what they did not contribute to. And even if they are to, bear the consequences, there should be a level of responsibility or accountability of those who are causing this negative impact to prove themselves, to ensure that the communities that are most affected, are given a chance or an opportunity to design the solutions that will enable them to thrive. All right. So before we, so we say, why is it about power? Because the concept of justice is really tricky, because if it's being served in a position of power imbalances, you will see that those with the least power tend to lose in the the way I would like to call it is like in a power tussle here, because that is the way that it seems. It's like the big countries are doing this, and the smaller ones get to suffer. The African proverb that says, when two elephants are fighting, it is the ground that suffers. So that's just how it's being played out. So what are the various power dynamics and power play that we see in the climate space? And I would like to get comments, which countries cause over half of global emissions? I would like to get responses on this. Which countries cause over half of global emissions? We know the answers. I just want to hear them coming up.
All right. For now, none of them have answered, so we are still waiting.
Okay,
Participants, please. We need answers.
Okay, just want to be sure we're on the same page.
Yeah. China, USA, China, USA and China, America, China,
Okay.
India, America, countries located in the global north, Asia, USA, China.
Okay, so
America.
I think they are the two most recurring countries you mentioned are the US and China, and you're absolutely correct. Countries in the global north as well, contribute to over half of global emissions that we see. I can't really say for India, but I think India is also impacted by these global emissions. And that brings us to our next question. Who makes the big climate decisions? So among the countries of the world, generally, who makes big climate decisions? You guys, I want to hear from you. I know you know these things. It's who makes the big climate decisions?
I just hope they are answering the second question now. Someone said Russia. Another said Ukraine. Someone Another person said most generally, most of the northern countries of the world. USA, China, USA.
Okay, amazing. So in these two, between these two terms, we see that there is an intersection of the people who cause global emissions are still the same group of people who make the climate decisions, right? And should that even be so? I'll leave that as a rhetorical question. Should that be so? The countries who, cause global emissions are the ones who are seated and still making the climate decisions. I mean, on various fronts, or it depends on whatever context we're looking at this now. But should that be so generally? We'll come back to that. And then lastly, whose voices are missing? So generally, in the whole climate change, climate policy, decision making, whose voices are missing where or when these decisions are being made. Whose voices are missing, guys? There's no right or wrong answer. We're all here to learn, so please feel free to do so.
Please, are we getting what our facilitator is saying? Because I can still see people saying UN. Another said developing countries, voices of the developing countries.
Okay.
Someone said youth voices, the
Amazing.
consumers, developing countries, Africans,
Amazing.
underdeveloped countries, China, countries with low economic power.
Amazing.
Developing
So
countries, yeah.
thank you. Really, really great point. So it means we are on track, and we're getting it. So we see that these are the voices that are missing. And yet, if you make reference on who makes the climate decisions, you're not finding any of these voices making those decisions. And what does this tell us? That the people who are most impacted are not involved in the decision-making processes regarding what is affecting them as a community or as a country or as a group of people. So we see that there's a gap. There's a wide gap that has to be bridged to ensure that the people who are affected the most are able to represent or amplify their own voices to say, look, this is what we are going through, and this is what we need to ensure that, okay, we are adapting to a changing climate, or where possible, we're able to mitigate some of the effects that are being caused. But in the course of this entire process, we see that these key voices are lacking from in the decision-making processes, as well as even in developing climate solutions. So, and again, we talk about power dynamics. We all know the COP that happens every year. I think last year was COP 30 in Brazil, where climate conversations are being had, climate justice, gender justice, climate finance, different voices coming together, right? And even within those groups or conference of parties, we know and even observe that most of the people who are there are not the people who are impacted or affected the most. And on a percentage, on a proportion, if you look at it, it's always there's an imbalance. The ratio of people who are impacted to the ratio of those who are not present at these sort of meetings where decisions are being made, it's imbalanced, right? And from the image on the left and right, we see the communities that are facing the consequences, and then we see a group, a conference that is being held. Everyone suits and ties on, and nobody is interested in finding out or in inquiring from hearing from the people who are experiencing these impacts to glean insights, right? To gain knowledge, to say, okay, this is what is going on. How do we progress with climate solutions? How do we progress with, climate adaptation or climate mitigation approaches or practices that, should be implemented in your countries or in your communities or in your groups? So everyone gathers here and make commitments that we never see to fruition, make certain agendas, design policy, bills that oftentimes end up in paper and are not seen in practice. So climate justice says this gap should be bridged, right? It should be bridged in the sense that the people who are most affected should engage in climate policy, in climate finance, in climate solutions, etc., and so on, to ensure that resources are being distributed fairly and equally, and everyone's voice is being acknowledged in the room. Right. So we made mention of those who, the voices that are missing, and we find out, yes, people from the global south, low and middle income countries are the ones who are affected. We talk about indigenous people. We talk about women and girls who are affected. We talk about rural farmers and fisher folks. We talk about children and the elderly. So these are communities, these are groups where climate justice is being demanded. Climate justice, climate reparations, and various adaptation measures that should be put in place. So these groups of people are most affected, but at the same time, their voices are listed in rooms where decisions are being made concerning them. And a popular phrase that I like to say is, nothing about us without us. So whatever decisions are being made should always involve these diverse groups of people to ensure that we are developing solutions for, by, and with them. And so we see the various impacts of climate change across various communities. And the first is with identifying the health impacts. We see in the health impacts, we see there's the physical health impact, and there's the mental health impacts. Physical health ranging from respiratory diseases to even infectious diseases, as the case may be. And then, mental health impacts linked to environmental stressors. We hear things like nostalgia, eco-anxiety, and, the likes of them. And, I worked on the Connecting Climate Minds project where we identified, the impact of climate change on mental health among young people, among indigenous people, among among rural farmers and and fishermen, right? And the results were very were mind-blowing, so to say. And one would think that, okay, because when we generally hear climate change, we just think it ends in the environment. But now there are evidences that it really goes beyond that, because the mental stressors that come with losing your land or having to migrate, being displaced, and all of those are linked to the mental health impacts of climate change, right? So people experience things like nostalgia, and when people even come down with heat stroke due to rising temperatures, and then people experience eco-anxiety, and some go down with having PTSD from when probably in when there's a flood and maybe losing lives and properties in the process. So in this context now, we need to, address these diverse climate impacts in communities and in various groups. So beyond the health impacts, we see the challenge of displacement and migration, farmers losing their land to desertification, having to move elsewhere to start life anew or to learn something new. All of those can be really overburdening, and you see that it increases, it leads to overcrowded cities, and also like increases tensions. And then we look at, access to clean water. Where there's flood, dirty water after floods can, cause cholera outbreaks, can cause malaria, other infectious diseases outbreaks. And just beyond this, you will see that it's like an endless chain, because by the time you start having overcrowded cities from when people are being displaced or have migrated, you now see that the government needs to do more work, right, in ensuring that there is available resources within those cities to meet or match the population, right? And then when you now talk about the infectious disease that comes with it, you see that the health sector is also overstrained or overburdened, trying to meet up to curb certain disease transmission within the community or within groups. So these are the other like social issues that we tend to see that comes up. So from individuals experiencing climate impact, it goes down to the government, economic impact, because if we look at like food security now, if lands are being lost, crops are not growing or are not producing fruits in their due season, it leads to like food shortage, right? And then with food shortage also comes like hike in food prices. So you tend to spend more to ensure that you're eating well, right? So if you're already like struggling to survive, maybe struggling to pay rent, pay school fees, or have just basic amenities. And then you also have to start thinking of spending extra money in ensuring that you're able to get good food to eat. So that is a big deal, right? So we now see that there are various ways that these inequities and injustices plays out. So just from one common source, we now see that it, escalates and grows into something bigger than the individual. And in most times, in most cases, if there are no like strong institutions or strong governmental bodies, it grows even into like national economic development indexes. And then, it goes on and on and on like a chain or like a cycle that keeps on moving. So we now see that we've moved beyond the environmental issue. We are facing social consequences. We are facing the economic impact. And then we now talk of the human rights issues that might even come with displacement and migration. When people are displaced, moving into their host community, sometimes they might face other like they might face internal stigma from within the community, right? Moving into another place that you're not familiar with. So it's like an endless loop. And so when we talk about climate justice, how do we engage on the issue of climate justice? How do we demand climate justice, right? And the first is equity, right? We know what equity is. It's similar to justice, but it's not. Equity is, fairness, of course, not sameness. It's not like equality. I don't know if you understand the difference between equity and equality. So equality says, let me give an instance. So equality says that, okay, we are giving $10,000 to women and girls and rural farmers, right? We're giving them $10,000 for climate mitigation and adaptation. That is equality. Everybody in the community or in different groups are being treated equally. But equity says that, okay, we think that rural farmers would need $15,000 and women and girls will need $10,000 in for climate adaptation or mitigation. So equity is on a needs basis. So it acknowledges that not everyone exists on the same pedestal. Some needs are higher than the other. So what we need to do is to ensure that while we are meeting the needs of people at this level, we are able to meet the needs of others below to ensure that they come up here. Because if we give both of them at different levels $10,000, is still imbalance, right? So we need to approach climate justice with equity. So giving the most help to those most affected and on a specific needs basis. Let it be tailored to each community, to each group. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, right? And then the next is participation. So like, of course, like it says, participation, like community involvement. So you need to get communities to and actively participate in programs, in climate solutions, in climate interventions within communities. So take for instance, you want to educate rural farmers on climate smart agriculture, right? And you now say, oh, we are bringing this initiative for you and we want you to learn about climate smart agriculture, right? Without consulting them first on their needs. But if you were to ask the community, you will see that educating them on climate smart agriculture is point B. So you are missing the point A, where in the sense that maybe they need access to arable land to start farming and then engage in climate smart agriculture practices. So you have missed point A to point B. Although your point B is very valid and of course will serve them, but that is not the core need at that point in time. So if you are engaging the community actively to participate in those interventions, you will get to learn that, oh, we need access to arable land first, and then we'll start learning about climate smart agriculture, and then everything moves that way. And the next is responsibility. So responsibility works both ways. You as advocates and the polluters as well. So in responsibility, we look at the polluters pay principle, right? Those who are polluting, who are contributing to the global emissions, must pay for the consequences that they are causing to the people, right? So it is, as climate advocates, you're in a position to hold these leaders responsible, hold them accountable for their commitments to ensure that they pay for the damages that they have caused, and you have a responsibility as well to ensure that climate justice is being demanded and served. And then restoration as well. Of course, restoration refers to repairing damaged ecosystems and livelihoods in places where properties have been lost or schools have been washed away or brought down. We are talking about rebuilding communities back again to ensure that people can thrive within those systems, rebuilding the schools, the marketplaces, or the health systems or structures to ensure that there is sustainable livelihood again. And then lastly is just transition, moving to clean energy, training workers in oil industries for renewable energy and jobs to ensure that the resources are being distributed evenly. Okay, so in the course of demanding for climate justice, and in the process we see various barriers, challenges, and one of which is greenwashing. Just like, I don't know if you're familiar with the term brainwash. When you're being brainwashed, it means you're kind of like being tricked or being scammed or being fooled, so to say. So we see this in the context as greenwashing, right? And what is greenwashing? When companies pretend to be eco-friendly, but they keep selling harmful products, right? So I don't know if you've seen some plastics say eco-friendly, but I don't know what's eco-friendly about plastics. They're producing plastics and you say they're eco-friendly. So maybe someone will tell me if they are eco-friendly plastics. I may not know much as well, but we see some of those things, some of those instances play out with most companies. And also like in I don't know if you take like fizzy drinks, like soda drinks, right? There are some, like over here in Nigeria, you see some soda drinks where they say zero sugar, right? And the concept of zero sugar is to ensure that, so if you're producing a good with zero sugar, of course, generally in the health sector, you're trying to reduce like sugar intake. So when you come up with a drink that's zero sugar, the tax on that drink will be lower. So we now see most companies saying zero sugar, zero sugar. But when you taste zero sugar and you taste the normal one, they are almost the same thing. Or if not, the zero sugar is even more sweeter than the one with the sugar content. So we see these tricky moves to try to maybe escape tax or make more profit and all of that. So it is the same that happens in greenwashing. And then we see another barrier is climate finance. High income countries, every year that they meet at COP, they pledge billions of dollars. Each country can make their pledges towards the is it the NDCs or the NDAs? I might be missing it. The nationally determined contributions or so like that by countries. I think it's the NDCs. So every
Yes,
year
the
they come.
NDC.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So it's the NDCs, they pledge billions, millions of dollars yearly to help low and middle income countries adapt. But at the end of the year, that's why I said it is also our responsibility to hold these people accountable. I know it may not be easy, but a little effort, little drops, can form a mighty ocean. So, your voice is not too small to, contribute to the global discourse. So we see that these pledges are oftentimes just there, they're on paper. Nothing is being done. We don't see them fulfilling this, we don't see them living up to their words or saying all of those things come to fruition. And then the next is policy inaction. Everywhere we have climate laws, this, that, bills, agendas, and all what's not. And the key thing that is always lacking is with implementation. It is one thing to have the policy in place. It's another thing to ensure that it is being implemented. So even when we talk about like climate policies, although there are still gaps in existing policies, but we want to ensure that they are being implemented and being monitored as well. And then lastly, we see misinformation. I think this is very because even in my work during the climate advocacy, I just get some of those like backlashing. And these are like people in my close network to them like, you guys are just overthinking these things. It's not happening anywhere. So there are still people that don't believe that climate change is real. And it's so sad that I don't wish it on anyone to really experience the impact before you begin to know that it's real. But it is happening, and we are already seeing those changes. I mean, growing up, we knew all the seasons and everything that we have, but I can boldly say that a lot has changed over time, over the years. So our actions or inaction can either make it worse or better over time. So what do we need to do to address these gaps, to address these barriers? Sorry, give me a second.
Okay, Molly, thank you so much so far. But please, I want to say something before you continue. Please, participants, you should like keep your questions because there will be a question and answer session. Molly is actually very intelligent. Please don't let her go with all the resources in her brain. Don't have the opportunity to ask her your questions, then you keep it feeling like maybe your question is stupid or anything. No, no question is stupid. We all need clarity, and don't let Molly go until she clears your doubts. So please keep your questions. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. And yeah, it's a learning space, so feel free to ask all of those uncomfortable questions. So I think in addressing some of those barriers, we can recommend, of course, we need like policy and regulations. Like I've earlier stated, there are existing climate policies, but yet there are existing gaps even within those policies. So so the current policies that we see, often push for renewable energy. We see things like flood and damage control. There are even like better waste management laws depending on your country, right? And there's demand for justice in climate policies. Across some of these marginalized groups and vulnerable communities that we listed. Some are covered while others are not. So even in the policy and regulation, there are gaps, which includes like lack of funding for environmental health studies in underserved communities, and insufficient community representation in environmental decision making. And this boils down to knowledge, to knowing, right? We spoke about misinformation as a barrier. If communities are not aware, they cannot represent their community, right? It's from a place of awareness and knowledge that you now say, oh, we really have to stand up for ourselves, stand up for what is right, and demand justice in climate decision making and climate processes, right? So we also need to do more community activism and advocacy. I know like a lot is out there. Much work has been done, but more still needs to be done. And all the work that has been done out there are very much applauded, right? They are great work so far, but we don't want to lose the gains that has been made so far. So we have to keep up with the momentum, starting from your local community, or even if you're involved at the legislative level, you can start from there and begin to, demand, engage in those processes, and loop in community members to ensure that community voices are well represented in those rooms where decisions are being made. So your community activism, your advocacy to your local farmers, to rural farmers in your local community, telling them how to adapt to changing climate, what they must do, how to grow their crops, talking about climate literacy. Will come to that. So we see some of these advocacy works, activism movements, even globally. You can do awareness campaigns and the like. So in communities, we see locals planting mangroves to protect their shorelines from erosion. And from a report, they planted over 10,000 mangrove seedlings as part of the community-based Red Plus project focused on mangrove restoration. So there are diverse ways that one can get involved in demanding climate justice. And then we look at climate finance, which is a more tricky area, as well as climate policy, that you demand that high income countries honor their pledges every year, and that you hold them accountable, right? You cannot say your voice cannot be heard. You can keep putting your voice out there. We all know how the internet works this day. You can just be doing your thing and think nobody's watching. But at the end of the day, it just takes one day and you will see that, it's an impact that has been built over time, right? So do not be discouraged. Keep putting your voice out there. Keep doing what's right. Demand, hold them accountable, make them to be responsible for whatever pledges that they've made. And then education, climate literacy should be basic and widely comprehensible, especially at the grassroots. We need to engage at that level, begin from take on a bottom-up approach to ensure that, okay, these people have knowledge of what's going on. They understand the simple terms that the climate is changing. This is what they must do. This is what they can act on. This is how their voices can be represented, or you can be a voice representing them. And engage in capacity building processes to ensure that you also build their capacity, so they can even engage in local laws and policies that are being made concerning them. And yeah, so in conclusion, so far we've established that climate justice is crucial for equitable climate solutions, because there is nothing about us without us. You cannot bring a solution for me when you have not heard my experiences about the challenges I'm going through. So what solutions are you then providing that you think are tailored fit for me? So climate justice is crucial for developing climate solutions. So in our various communities, in our countries, in our groups where we belong, advocacy groups, we can support policy changes. We can amplify marginalized voices. Like I'm an advocate for climate justice from a gendered perspective. So demanding justice for women and girls that face disproportionate impact of climate change. So your climate justice can be focused on a particular group, or if you have the capacity to cover all groups. So you can come from a gender perspective, or if you're closer to rural farmers, you can come from that perspective to demand justice for rural farmers or demand justice from indigenous people to ensure that their knowledge and experiences are valued within climate processes, right? Ensuring that, okay, you're advocating for the children and the elderly or for low-income communities. So choose an area of focus, or if you want to generalize, that's totally fine. You know, like I said, depending on your capacity that, you know, you want to advocate for. And, you know, my final words, which would be that we did not inherit the earth from our parents. We are only borrowing it from our children. So that means we have a responsibility to protect the children who are coming ahead of us, to ensure that they are coming to meet a sustainable system where they won't have to suffer, but they are able to thrive. So thank you very much.
Okay, so this is the questions and answer session. Just drop your questions in the chat box. And please, so many people are asking about the attendance list. It will be shared after the questions and answer session, please. Drop your questions. Your question is not stupid. We are all here to learn, and you don't have to leave this masterclass the same way you came, please.
Do we have any questions so far? I think it's either of two things. It's either I articulated properly, or maybe I did say something you wanted to hear.
Okay, the first question. Can I go with the first question?
Yes, you can.
Most of the policies we have are just backing dogs. How can we make them biting rather than backing?
Amazing. So I think, like I said, the policy space is a really tricky one when it comes to implementation and, you know, enforcing those laws that are put in place in the first place. So I think as individuals or as community or and advocacy groups, we can decide to, you know, hold the government accountable, or build or rather maybe support them with developing a standard operating procedure to ensure that these policies are being implemented. And if it's much easier if you're closer to the legislative, where these policy processes are being made. That way, you're able to influence the process and develop a task force team, right? To see that these policies are not just on paper. They have to be translated into practice. We want to be seeing real-time interventions, real-time implementations of the policies we have on paper. And trust me, it's not a one-day thing. It really takes time. So and like I said also, you have to give in your efforts, make your contributions. You might think you're not doing anything, but consistently over time and with time, you begin to see, you begin to see positive outcomes from, engaging in those processes. I hope
Okay.
I've been able to, answer that. It's just to encourage you to keep it up if you're already doing it and to not be discouraged or do not deter. Yeah.
Okay, next. They said Molly, yeah, it's referring to you, right? You said that climate change is noticeable but not considered, right? So when we find the solutions on policy and regulation, we have said demand justice in climate policy. Can you explain these points? I don't seem to understand.
Uh, I think I'm a little bit confused with that
Same
question.
here. The sentence is not really clear. Too crazy to
Yeah,
think. Please, can you rewrite your question? It's not
if you can
really clear.
rephrase that, yeah, I don't get.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Many people do not accept climate change as an urgent issue of the world due to other problems like war, conflicts, famine, inflation, and other. How one can aware people, okay, how can someone make people aware in such conditions?
Hmm. So I think here context really matters, right? Because if you're in a conflict affected area, right? Having the discourse around climate change might not be acceptable in that context. Because if you're talking of, maybe it's later on, if the people have been able to rehabilitate or find themselves in a new community where they are trying to where they are trying to settle in, but amidst war, amidst conflict, having those education or awareness conversations become really, I would say, become tricky and insensitive at that point in time. But in a general context where this is where is very much applicable, of course, the world has so many problems, and you cannot solve the world problems all at once. We have many problems as humans generally, right? So that's why we have different people working in different sectors, working in agriculture, working in science, working in engineering, working in health, working in where else, in government, and so on and so forth. So you focus on doing what you're doing, on engaging with those who are affected by the climate impact. Because if you talk about what's the one thing, okay, you said farming also. So
Yeah.
if you look at the concept of farming now, it still boils down to food shortage. And it's the same thing we're saying. The community may see it as farming, but it is now your responsibility that now you know that, okay, this is not just farming. If it's a community that, in time past, you know that, oh, we used to have good production, we had everything, but times are changing, seasons are changing. I mean, that's an opportunity to advocate, to create more awareness that, look, this is not just normal. It is as a result of this, we are experiencing food shortage and we need to find a way forward from this. So in that context now, you are able to create awareness that is relevant to, the problem, that is relevant to the ongoing challenges that they are facing at that point in time.
All right. Okay, next question. How attainable is climate justice according to you, given that policymakers get a one size fits all solution for everyone everywhere to implement? How attainable is climate justice for you?
So climate justice is very much attainable, right? And like I said, it is focused on different groups. So I mean, myself coming from a gendered perspective, there's been progress so far with advocating for climate justice for women and girls, ensuring that women are empowered on climate smart agriculture. They are empowered in, engaging in tree planting or mangroves planting, ensuring that, girls have access to education, to, engage in climate governance, climate finance, climate conversations, and so on. So it depends on the area that you are focusing on. If you're focusing on people living in the coastlines, most times in, should I say, in coastal areas or in communities where there is oil rigging, where they mine oil and all of those, you can demand for climate justice in that community to ensure that the people who are polluting that community are able to, I don't like to use the word compensate, but for lack of words, are able to like compensate the communities, right? So that they are able to, adapt to the changes. So it is very much attainable, but what I would say is that it takes time. And what I would also like to say that do not look for a 100% progress at the instant, right? It's a gradual process. You will make 1%, 2%, 3%, 5%, 10%, and gradually that's how you go. So you don't just go in and expect to get 80% results. It's, a step-by-step process, but it's very much attainable.
Okay, thank you so much, Molly. We won't be reading all the questions because Molly has explained, she has given answers, and it has answered a lot of questions. Okay, so we'll be taking the last few questions. May I kindly know whether it is possible for Molly to share her email address? The session was insightful, and I would like to consult on what I'm currently writing on. So, Molly, is it possible for you
Yes,
to share your email address? All right.
yes, I can do that. I can share that with you, and you just
Is there a future for climate justice in developing countries at all, considering all those in helm of affairs, those who make the decisions? I think you've somehow answered this question during your explanation.
okay. Take that again.
Is there a future for climate justice in developing countries, considering that, considering all those in helm of affairs, those who make the decisions?
Hmm. Considering those at the helm of affairs are from the global north, is that what they're
Yeah,
trying to say?
yeah,
So
I
I think,
think.
yeah, I've been emphasizing on this for long that there is hope. And as I think, yeah, one thing I'll say is that we need our collective voices, right? We don't want disoriented or scattered voices, because if you're demanding climate justice as developing countries, you have to come collectively, come together and say, look, this is the challenges, this is what we are facing, and we are demanding climate justice on every area. So you can take your advocacy global, you can make videos around it, do research publications, publish articles, pieces that writing to the writing to the government and holding them accountable as well in some of this process. So as developing countries, we can hope that, um, of course, we are making progress, but you know what we can't do? We can't really force the money out of the people who are supposed to pay, right? But with very much advocacy, very much consistency and persistence, right? with persistence, we can get what we want.
Okay, next question. I think this is the last. What could be causes of failure of some of climate change policies in most developing countries apart from government intervention?
What could be the causes of policy failure?
Yeah. In most developing countries apart from government intervention.
Possible causes of failure. I think, yes, you mentioned government intervention is one of them. But at the same time, I also like to say that we as individuals, we need to hold ourselves accountable, right? Because we see these various things playing out in our various countries. I don't know what country the person is joining from, but in my country, I've noticed that there are instances where, okay, the government is doing their best to ensure that, okay, these things are being implemented. But the people who are in charge are not doing their work. They are not living up to expectations. So beyond the government involvement in intervention and processes, we also need to look at the at individual part, who is in charge, who is leading this implementation. Are they doing their work? Are they living up to expectations? But the key thing is the laxity of the government first of to initiate that process. Then we can now begin to think, okay, who are the individuals that we want to now hold accountable?
All right, thank you so much. So I wanted to end here, but there's one question I would like you to answer, which will be the last question. They have so many brilliant questions, and yeah. Is there any climate change measurement framework put in place to monitor these positive changes made to amend the climate? If yes, what are they, especially in Africa?
Take that again.
Is there any climate change measurement framework put in place to monitor these positive changes made to amend the climate? If yes, what are they, especially in Africa?
Hmm. Especially in Africa. So I think not, I do not have them at the top of my head, but there are various data metrics and measurements that are being used to measure these changes over time. Because if you look at publications, you get to know what year was the hottest. I think 2024 was like the hottest year in history. Either 2024 or 2023, one of those was the hottest year in history. So where to get the data is what I am not sure about, but the data is available out there, and feel free to do your research. If you're an analyst, feel free to do your research and identify those if you're looking for like figures specifically, right? But if you're not really into figures, I mean, from what we say, like seeing is believing. But I believe as scientists, you want to um, place your facts on evidence, right? You want to bank on evidence-based facts to be able to put forth your strong stance. So feel free to explore the available data on how the climate is changing. So there are figures, there are statistics out there.
All right, thank you so much. So we've come to the end of our beautiful session. But before I conclude, please, I would like people to sign the attendance form. It is in the chat box. Please don't forget. Okay. Thank you so much, Molly. One thing, my take back home message is we did not inherit the world from our forefathers. Instead, we are borrowing the world from our children. So yeah, we need to take care of it. Since we are borrowing, when you borrow something, you must actually take good care of it. So let it stick. That's my own take home message. Yours might be different, but yeah, that's mine. Thank you so much, Molly, for this insightful and inspiring session. And thank you all for your participation, engagement, and questions. Today, we have explored why climate justice is critical, how it affects our communities, and what young Africans can do to take meaningful action. Remember, knowledge alone is not enough. It is never sufficient. But action is what transforms our communities. What we need is action. The knowledge you've gained here, you put into action. So I encourage each of you to take what you've learned today and apply it in your local context. Just as Molly said, your own may be gender-based, yours may be community-based, yours may be maybe what people are doing, yeah, in life, maybe profession-wise. Okay, on behalf of Cross Eco Network Initiative, I want to thank you all for your participation. We look forward to seeing the amazing impact you will be creating in your community. What we want is impact. Please don't forget to subscribe to the
So
channel.
you can just put in the chat, what do we want climate justice?
Yeah. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, to the YouTube channel, so that you always stay updated with classes and many more interesting resources that Eco Cross Network Initiative will be bringing. We have a lot to offer, so please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Okay, have a wonderful evening, everyone. Bye. Thank you, Molly.
All right. Thank you too. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.